Yes, sir.
Madam Speaker, thank you. Yesterday, Kevin McCarthy told us he essentially feels that you are holding House Democrats hostage from speaking out about the border crisis because of the way you whip on the House floor. How would you respond to that, and do you believe the border is secure?
Well, I believe that we have to have a secure border, and I think that we are trying to address, the president has a plan to address that. Securing our border is part of our security, to protect and defend our country. Let there be no doubt. I don't respond to those kind of questions. I mean, with all due respect, I'll respect to your question at the end, but not to his comments, because I don't even know what he's talking about, and I don't know if he does. But the fact is that we have a responsibility to secure our border. We also have a responsibility to recognize the importance of newcomers to our nation. Right now, the best thing that we can do for our economy is to have comprehensive immigration reform. We have a shortage of workers in our country, and you see even in Florida, some of the farmers and the growers saying, why are you shipping these immigrants up north? We need them to pick the crops down here. But that doesn't mean that we don't recognize our moral responsibility as well. When the president, the former, occasional occupant of the White House who preceded President Biden, when he had the ban on Muslims, everybody came forward. Our military, our diplomats, our faith community. And one part of the faith community, the evangelical community of America, they came forward and said, the refugee resettlement program of the United States is the highlight of our humanitarianism in our country. It is. We have a responsibility to accept some of these people, but we have to know that they qualify for that. And what the administration is doing is increasing how we make sure that people come into our country in a timely fashion, are either here to stay or not. But protecting the border is our responsibility. We all know that, and that is something that we will work on. And again, my suggestion has always been to have the adjudication of some of this at the Guatemalan border before people pay coyotes billions of dollars to risk their lives coming across Mexico and maybe turned away at the border. But to remember three things. One, we must secure our border. Two, we have a moral responsibility to accept refugees. And three, our nation is great because we are a nation of immigrants. But don't take it from me. Listen to Ronald Reagan. When I quote Ronald Reagan to my Republican colleagues, he doesn't get any applause. Can you imagine that? Not even Ronald Reagan, who has really said America is preeminent in the world because we have a constant flow of newcomers to our country. And when we close the door, we will be diminishing our preeminence in the world. Don't take it from me. Go to Google, look up President Reagan's last speech as President of the United States. This is the last speech I will make as President of the United States, and I want to communicate a message to a country that I love and go from there. Yes, sir.
I may ask you about the ongoing protests in Iran. What started as a protest about the arrest of a woman 2 weeks ago she was killed in police custody has grown far more than the capital, and now there's an international outcry about it. Firstly, I want to ask you about women in Iran burning their mandatory hijab. What do you think about women in Iran protesting mandatory hijab? And secondly, with all the calls growing for the downfall of the Islamic Republic, do you think if in fact a regime falls in Iran, Washington, D.C. would be ready for that?
Well, let me just say that we're all in awe of the courage of the women of Iran coming out in terms of their own personal freedom. The sadness of the death, the murder, as we have seen the description of her death, of this brave woman, is heartbreaking, but it has provoked a response. That anguish has turned into action that can be helpful in terms of freedom for women and others in Iran. I think everyone I don't know anyone who hasn't spoken out about support for the women of Iran and the courage they have of going forth. If that leads to a change in government in Iran, we'll see what happens there. Certainly, I don't have to tell you. People thought when the Shah was overturned and this new government came in, it was going to be about democracy. And many of the same people who fought so hard for removing the Shah ended up in jail by these same leaders that are there now. So we hear a great deal from people saying we had our hopes and prayers and we fought for change, and that change turned on us into a very oppressive regime. So let's see how the change will take place. But again, we're always talking about democracy. As I said, security, economy, governance, and governance about how you respect and treat your people is very important, and how democratic your government is. Yes, Jan.
Good morning. We have a rather striking statement here from Abigail Spanberger criticizing the Democratic leadership over not calling up the stock bill here. I know that was just put out the new version just a couple of days ago.
Yeah.
She criticized the process. She says it is time for new leadership. What do you say in response to her criticism, but generally going forward as we get after the midterms,
yeah,
people start to wonder whether you're going to be here and other leaders are going to be here in the new Congress?
Which question do you want me to answer? Choose one.
Do you intend to be here in the new Congress as the Speaker, as the minority leader?
I'm strictly focused on winning the next election. Do you want to talk about that? Okay, is that your question? Who's next? And let me just say about Spanberger's letter. First of all, her bill is contained in this bill. Other members had ideas too to improve upon the bill. So I didn't see I don't know what her statement is, but it is contrary to what the House Administration Committee. I said to them, whatever the members want to do, I fully support. And they took her bill, added others that made the bill stronger, as a matter of fact. So this is an interesting press release, but it's more important to write a bill.
What she's saying is she's criticizing the failure to bring it up.
Well, you have to have the votes to bring it up.
You don't think you have the votes?
Well, we'll see. We'll work to have the vote. We don't go from one day to the next. But I think we should have legislation. There are others who have spoken out against the bill. And again, this is the legislative process. But it is how you described her characterization is not accurate. Her bill is in the bill. Others had ideas too. And that's what our committee put forth. But it's good press because you asked the question. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
The inequality ahead of the midterms. Are you doing enough to address inequality in American society, and also are you running enough progressive candidates, do you think, in these midterms?
Absolutely, positively. And equality in America is what we are all about. And I'm glad you asked that question because I want to speak to our President of the United States. Of course, our purpose in Congress as House Democrats is about fairness for America's working families. And that means all of America's working families. But this president and all these bills that I named, you take them one by one. When you talk about the American Rescue Plan, it was there to make sure that we put money in the pockets of America's working families, and also about child tax credit and all the things that gave people more of a chance to rebound from COVID. And it was about fairness. It reduced poverty in America by 50%. Reduced poverty in America by 50%. The infrastructure law has a $60 billion provision in it for fairness, equity, inclusion, and in terms of decisions being made for infrastructure projects around the country to be fair. I was in a community in Georgia within this past month where we were looking at a highway that went through a neighborhood, It separated the neighborhood, changed property values on one side or another, divided community. That's what this bill is exactly against, to not separate communities, but unify them, and to do so in a way by having communities make the decision, by having so much more involvement of the communities in how these projects are developed. So the president, fantastic on that. Of course, the PACT Act, that was really addressed many people living in poverty in America in terms of especially the North Carolina provisions about unsafe water and what that meant to families. And the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act was, and that's about keeping guns out of the hands of people who shouldn't have them, but it doesn't go far enough. We have to do much more in that regard. Chips and science. Now, this goes to directly to your point. You may have seen people during this debate, and some of them very reputable and in my respect, saying, let's just do the CHIPS Act, let's just do the CHIPS Act, let's just do the CHIPS Act. And we said, well, that's interesting. We need to do the CHIPS Act for the here and now. But for as we go forward, we need to have the Science Act. The Science Act is about making sure that everybody, and this is the president again, everybody has the opportunity to participate in those jobs and is prepared by education about being involved in the scientific research, about the science of it all. So we have the best thinking from maybe some of the newest intellectual resources from kids in poor neighborhoods, from communities that are not the traditional places that receive grants from the federal government. So it is, and it has minority serving institutions and all the rest participating in a strong way. We're very, very, very proud of that because, again, this is what we have tried to do incrementally. These pieces of legislation are transformative because, again, we have a signature and an intellectual resource in the White House. Yeah, we're very proud of our candidates, and we feel very strong. They had the courage to run. See, when the jobs decision came down, it was like, well, we were ready. Some people might, another circle. Did you say this to you before? Bob Dole said after the Republicans won in 1994, he said, if I knew we were going to win, we would have had better candidates. Well, we always believed that we were going to win, and we do have better candidates. And they've been campaigning, some of them for almost 2 years, a year and a half. They believe they could win, and they're a good match for their districts. And we have generationally, we have young people, we have diversity of experience, and I'm very proud of the candidates as well as the courage of our members to seek re-election when all the powers that be in Washington, D.C., whoever they may be, with their conventional, whatever that might be, wisdom, which I don't trust, were saying that we couldn't win. Did you say we have one? Unfortunately, I have to go to debate.
Do you have a response to President Zelensky moving to join NATO this morning in an expedited fashion?
Well, I can't miss my time to speak on the floor on this bill, but let me just say that we're very committed to democracy in Ukraine, and of course, they have been a candidate for the EU, which we don't really have a vote in deciding about that. But at some point, let's win this war. But I would be for them having a security guarantee. But again, it's a big project. I was there in 1997 for the expansion of NATO in Paris. With all the countries of NATO speaking out in favor of NATO, with Yeltsin there recognizing the Partnership for Peace that was being instituted then to expand to Poland, to the Baltics, to other Central and Eastern European countries. It's a big project, but it's a consensus project as well with NATO. But let's just win the war now, and that's why I'm so pleased we have additional resources. I was in last week in Berlin for the G7 conference, which focused on NATO. I was very encouraged by how the other speakers of that meeting were so bullish on supporting the democracy until the victory was achieved. Thank you all.
The Giants are missing the playoffs this year. The forecast on the Warriors,